Alright, so ALS just dropped a brand new Godly update. There were definitely some units that changed the meta, so in today's video, we're going to be making a tier list. I try to give some detailed explanations for every unit, so it's going to have a lot of yapping. Sorry. Either way, I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, maybe leave a like or subscribe. But anyways, let's get into it. It has actually been a hot minute since I made a tier list, but here's what we'll be starting with today. We do have a bunch of units on here, and I think that every unit on here is good, close to meta in its own way. If not meta, they're all very close. They're all very, very good. But if you disagree or have any thoughts that I'd missed somebody, let me know in the comments, because of course this list is entirely my opinion, and not everything is 100% accurate. There are definitely things that can be improved. With all that being said, we're going to be ranking the units on this list in 5 different categories. The first one being meta overall / infinite, which pretty much means units that are very overall strong, but kind of expensive, and could be used more as infinites than just progressive units. Meta early means units that are very good for early waves, and doesn't mean that they're bad in later waves, it just means that they can be very, very good in early waves. It's hard to find units that are good in those. And we have support, which is of course going to be units that are more support oriented. They aren't really there on the team for their damage. Amazing, we have units that are pretty close to the meta, but not the very top of the game. And then farms, we have units that are going to make you money. With all those categories out of the way, I'm going to start off with the brand new units of the update, because we want to hop into the fun stuff, of course. So, starting with Flame Mage, this guy is pretty decent. He is 650 to place, and so is Ant King. These two I'm going to talk about at the same time. So Flame Mage is 650 to place, he has the Burn passive, and he has some pretty okay damage. He is Hybrid and Cone AoE on final upgrade. Ant King is very similar, he's 650 to place, and he has the Water element with the Poison passive. They don't have any special passive, by the way, neither of them do, but they have the Poison status effect, and he is full AoE on final upgrade, with a little bit higher damage than Flame Mage, I'm pretty sure. If not, he's still better in my opinion, because he is full AoE. Shadow General, another unit from the dungeons, is a line AoE on final upgrade, and he's a little bit more expensive to place down, I believe, but he has a bit higher damage than these two, the Ant King and Flame Mage, and he has the Cripple passive on a final upgrade, so he's very, very good as like a high damage, somewhat supporting unit, but not the top of the meta. He's pretty okay though. Next we have Antos. I'm sure a lot of you don't even know this guy exists. He is the Portal Secret unit, and from my knowledge, from what I've seen, nobody even has this guy. Nobody has this guy yet at the time I'm recording this. The only person who does is Otaku Gaming, because of course he spawns in all this loot. I'm not going to complain too much though, it's a whole nother can of worms, and I'm not going to open yet. But yeah, Otaku Gaming has this guy. He didn't really showcase exactly what he does, but from what I gathered from him and the community, this guy is mostly a support. He has a passive that is going to buff fire element units in his range by 10%. He has a Sunburn passive, which is a better version of Burn. It is going to have a 17% slow on top of the normal burn stats, I think. And then he also has another passive, which is going to make him do extra damage, I think it's either 10 or 20%, somewhere between there, to enemies that are burning or sunburned. So very, very good. This guy is a solid support for buffing fire elements. Next we have the new evolution for Cha-Hei-In, and I think this unit is actually very strong. She costs 700 to place, so she is cheap enough to be a starting unit, and she has some pretty okay damage on placement, some very okay damage on final upgrade though, really good damage. And then she has a couple special passives that are going to make her very strong. So she has one that is going to buff her crit rate and crit damage, which is very good in this game if you have the right build. And then she has another one that is going to buff her crit damage by even more and her range by even more if she has Sung Jin Woo in her range. So very good when paired with Sung Jin Woo. I think it can be any form of him, but especially good with the Godly. And I'd recommend you watch my video on the Godly to learn more about what he does. We'll talk about him now. Sung Jin Woo. So yeah, we're not going to go fully in detail on this guy because it's a lot to talk about. But he has a bunch of summons, a whole shadow army around him. It has a bunch of different elements like fire, water, nature. I think the only ones that are... Actually, no, not nature. Sorry, just fire, water, dark. The only ones they're missing are light and nature. And he's very, very strong just for pure damage. He has a bunch of abilities on those units that he summons in. And by far just the top of the DPS meta right now. He's really crazy. And he has no godly lead, but just pure damage. He's insane. Moving away from the units of the update, we have Aizen, and this guy's getting pretty old, but I do think he is still pretty good. I would say probably top of Amazing, or like near the top of Amazing. He's very strong. He is mostly an infinite unit because he has a passive that is going to increase his damage for getting kills. Without that passive, he's pretty weak, but he is a full AoE pressure hybrid unit, so very, very good as a support as well. Just for having pressure, it's a very good status effect to have. But yeah, Aizen's pretty good. Ichigo is a fear unit. He recently got buffed. This is Ichigo True Kai. And he is a Cone AoE on final upgrade with some very high hybrid damage. I'd say he's pretty good. I'd say probably... I'll put him here for now. He's probably not as good as Aizen with his kills, but Ichigo does some pretty good damage, and fear is always nice. Moving on to Garp. Garp actually got buffed recently, and he has some pretty solid hybrid damage, but he doesn't have like a passive or anything. He's just pure like raw damage, nothing special, and a circle hybrid AoE. Next we have Gon, and I think that Gon is actually pretty underrated. He is very expensive, but he is a nature option for some pretty solid hybrid damage, and also the pressure passive, which is a very good supporting option. Next we have Ragna, or I think his name is Sword Saint. He's actually really good. He does extra damage to flying enemies, which is pretty good for a hybrid option. Otherwise, I think he has the Blizzard passive, either that or Frostbite, if I'm not mistaken. I'll throw on screen which one, probably. But he's very strong for his damage, and he's pretty cheap. He's like an early game unit. But I wouldn't say he's top of the meta, I'd just say he's top of Amazing right now. Griffith is another unit I'd put in Amazing. He's probably pretty close to meta. He's very, very good, full AoE. He recently got buffed to have Dismantle, and I think either Fear or Slow, but he is a double passive, or double Saz Effect unit that is full AoE with some crazy damage. So I'd say he's top of Amazing at least. Here we have the Battle Pass unit, Urahara, or Kisuke, and he actually got buffed pretty recently too. Does a lot more damage now, but he is a full AoE unit hybrid with the Hemorrhage passive, and an ability that is going to block the base, so pretty much stopping enemies from doing damage to you, for I think like 30 seconds maybe? Something like that? Or it might be based on the amount of enemies, like it can block 3, but it's still a good supporting option. I'd say he's probably in support, I guess, because that's, yeah, all we can put the support people in. I don't know what I'm yapping about. Moving on to Guts. Guts is, I'd say, top of Amazing. Probably right above Griffith. He is a crazy full AoE dark damage unit option because he has full AoE, hybrid, bleed, and hemorrhage. So very, very good with the right soul and build. Very, very high dot damage there. Doma from the Christmas update is probably Amazing. Not too high in Amazing though. I'd say probably above Ragna, but not too high. He does some really good damage. He has Blizzard, and then he also has a special passive that will increase his damage by up to 100% after he gets a bunch of kills. So it's kind of like Aizen, but not quite like... Yeah, Aizen would probably be higher. Not quite as much damage. Aizen I probably put way too low. I put him here for now. Toshiro, I'd say, is another Amazing unit. He is full AoE. He has the Blizzard passive, I think? Either that or Frostbite. I get that confused with the Christmas units a lot, I'm sorry. But he has one of the freezing passives, and then he does also have a passive that is going to buff nearby units in range by, I think, 5% damage. And he's a full AoE hybrid unit. Pretty good for damage, I'd say. Probably Amazing, but not too high. I'll put him like here or here for now. I don't know, it depends on what builds you're running, I guess. Chad recently got buffed. This guy was actually used to be horrible, but he did recently get buffed, so he's now okay, at least. He still has no special passive. His damage is just okay. It's actually pretty good, but he's like a circle AoE hybrid damage unit, kind of like Garp, and nothing special really going for him. I'd say maybe like above Ant King in terms of damage, maybe? Somewhere around here, but he doesn't have anything special going for him, like no passive or anything. So I'm gonna put him like probably right here-ish. Now we have Ice Mage, or Gray. This guy's actually really good. I like this unit a lot. He is a meta early unit for sure. Cheaper than 600 to place, actually. He's really, really cheap to place. Maybe it's 600 on the dot. I don't remember. But he's full AoE, hybrid, and then he does have the Blizzard passive, I think? Sorry, another Christmas unit. I get these all confused. Either Blizzard or Frostbite. And he does have a special passive, which makes him do more damage to dark enemies, which kind of means he's like the first dual element unit, where he's going to be kind of like functioning as a light and a water. Very, very strong. Gremmy actually got buffed not too long ago as well. He costs 650 to place, and he has the random passive, or status effect, which is going to apply a bunch of random status effects every time he attacks. So every enemy he hits will have a random status effect, any status effect in the game from what I can tell, even summoning, which is pretty good. And his damage overall is just really good, and he has a nuke that does 15 billion damage on his final upgrade. So very, very solid unit here for early game, and also maybe a nuke if you need a nuke. I don't know. Now we have Unevo Chahayan, and the Evo I'd say is probably better. The Unevo I'd say is probably in Amazing. I don't think she's bad. She did recently get buffed, the Unevo version did. And she does some really good hybrid full AoE damage, but I'd say probably like here or here. She does really good, just plain raw full AoE damage. Yamamoto also does some really good full AoE damage, but his single target damage is okay. It's pretty high, but like not the highest in the game. He's mostly just like really strong in infinites because of his range. He has some crazy AoE DPS. He also has burn and then a summoning passive, which will summon a few enemies back to the base with a bunch of extra damage. So I'd say he's probably in overall meta. We don't really have anybody to compare him with but the Sun Jin Woo Godly for now. Denji is an okay unit. He is a full AoE hybrid bleed unit at final upgrade, and he does gain extra damage if next to a girl unit. So I'd say he's probably an Amazing. I'd put him probably above Doma. And while we're talking about Denji, I'll grab Makima real quick. They dropped in the same update. They're pretty similar in like terms of strength, but I'd say Makima in my opinion is stronger. She's not full AoE, but she does really good hybrid damage, and she has a special passive that will summon enemies. So enemies she kills has a chance to be respawned at the base with more than their HP that they spawn with. I think that summoning abilities with more than 100% HP are really broken, and I think that Makima is very strong. Next we have Green Beast, or Might Guy. I think that's his name. I haven't watched Naruto. Go ahead and flame me in the comments. But this guy is actually very good for hybrid damage. I'd say he is overall meta infinite. He has some very good fire element hybrid damage, and then an ability which kind of functions as a nuke. It increases his damage by a lot, and then it kind of like stops him from attacking afterwards. But very good overall. Pretty cheap as well. Giorno. Oh man, okay, this guy's really strong. Might be even like one of the strongest units in the game, honestly. So he costs 750 to place, so he's an early game unit. And I'd say he's kind of like meta anything. He's meta infinite, meta early, and meta support. But I'd put him probably in meta early most of all, and right here. He's very good. He is a slow unit on placement and hybrid. And at later upgrades, he does become full AoE with some crazy damage and some crazy OP special passives like doing percentage-based damage, and also an ability that is going to rewind and I think time stop enemies as well. So very strong as pretty much any role that you want him to be, a support, an early game unit, or an infinite unit. And the only catch is that you can place one of him on the entire map. Even if you're in multiplayer, it is not like a one time per person thing, it is a one time per game thing, so you can't place more than one Giorno, but he is very good. Bogata, or Gogeta, I think? I haven't watched Dragon Ball either. Sorry. Dragon Ball. I just called him Dragon Ball now. Gogeta is a meta unit overall, in my opinion. He is like a boss killer focused unit. He has a special passive that does more damage to bosses, I believe. Then he has an ability, which is going to do percentage-based damage to bosses and wipe out normal enemies off the map. Very good as a nuke in infinite settings. I'd say probably higher than Yamamoto, honestly. Very good for boss killing. I think this guy's name is Flash, and he is okay. I'd put him probably in amazing, like right about here. He's not full AoE, he just has some like crit passive, which is actually going to be very good with the right build. If you have glitch on him, crit is going to be going crazy. But overall, he's like kind of an early game light unit that isn't too crazy, but still pretty good. The boss rush unit, Ainz, is actually pretty okay. I think he's pretty good. He's pretty underrated in my opinion. He is very good for full AoE damage, and then he has an ability, which is going to serve as a nuke. I think it does like scaling off his damage, I think 150 times or something. I might be wrong, but it does a lot of damage. And then he does also have a special passive, which is going to summon enemies that he kills, or at least have a chance to, which can be pretty good for extra damage on the side. Overall, a very solid unit, just a little bit more on the expensive side, so we'll throw him in the meta overall / infinite. The second godly of our tier list is going to be Wukong. This guy is actually very good. I'd put him probably behind Sung Jin Woo, honestly, in the meta overall category. So he's pretty cheap, and he does get full AoE at a pretty early upgrade, so very good for progressive, and overall just an insane unit for damage. He's a monster, especially paired with Sung Jin Woo because of his godly lead of 35% extra team dot damage. I covered it in my video on Sung Jin Woo, but he has a lot of dot damage going for him, so these two combined can be very strong, especially because, as I mentioned earlier, Sung Jin Woo has a bunch of summons with every element except for light and nature. So yeah, Jin Mori is very good with Sung Jin Woo, and overall himself, very good unit with a special passive called something, like a better version of Electrified. I don't even remember the name, but it's very good. Obito. This guy's kind of a disappointment, I'm not gonna lie. A lot of people were hyped for him because he looks really cool and like a fan favorite of Naruto, but I put him in support, and towards the bottom of it, his damage is okay, but he's mostly a support. I feel like this can be said with a lot of the Naruto units. I'll actually drag him now. He's an okay support. He has an ability which is going to kind of take enemies away and bring them back after 20 seconds. But his damage overall just like isn't towards the meta of the game anymore, and I'd say that he's probably just mostly a support. Same thing goes for Madara. His damage is really good. Like all the Naruto units have good damage, but just not the meta of the game, like not the top of the game. And their abilities are going to have more value in my opinion. So he's mostly a support as well. He has two abilities. Madara has a nuke and a time stop and rewind. So actually very good. I'd say he's probably better than these two for supporting. Probably actually better than everyone right here. But yeah, he's in the support category as well. Naruto himself is also a support, kind of like Madara and Obito. So he has some pretty good damage, but he is mostly a support because of his passive, which is going to buff units near him by I think 15% damage and 5 or 10% range. It is probably the best buffing thing in the game. He can also be paired with Sasuke, because Sasuke is going to buff Naruto, and Naruto is going to buff Sasuke because of these two passives that they have. And I think Sasuke is probably really good for meta early, I'd say. He is a pretty cheap unit with the Black Flame passive, and he has a special passive that is going to give his Black Flame the perfect SPA. Which, if you don't know what that means, it means that pretty much as soon as his Black Flame ends, he's going to reapply it, and that leads to a lot of damage consistently. So very good. Shadow. I've actually not seen this guy in a very long time. He's from the Halloween update. and he's kind of getting old and power crept. He does some pretty okay full AoE hybrid dark damage, and he has the bleed passive, but most of his value I think will come from his nuke now. He has a 10 billion damage nuke that can also heal the base, but like not past the cap, so it's not very useful, that part is. But 10 billion damage nuke, full AoE damage, not that bad. Oh, farms. I probably should have started with farms. Hold on. Yojin, where's my Idol at? Idol and Robin. So between these three, Idol is by far the best farm. She has a supporting thing where she is going to buff units in range by I think 15% damage and range. Very, very good. And she is also going to make the most money out of all of them. Yojin is probably second best for money because he is like the cheapest for progressive really. And then Robin is kind of like an infinite base farm unit. She doesn't have anything special, just a bunch of money on final upgrade, but she is very expensive to get there. Red Pirate, or Shanks, actually got buffed not too long ago. He is a pretty solid unit for supporting. He's not the best though, his damage is getting really outdated. But he does have a supporting passive with Conquered, the SAS effect. He's actually the only unit in the game with that Conquered SAS effect, so it's very unique to him. And I'd say he's probably a support right about here. Time King is also a support, actually like all of these units are, but Time King is a full AoE unit with the stun passive. It also has a time stop, so he's very, very good for light support, I guess. Very good for slowing down the enemies, and I'd probably put him right about here for now. Right about here, maybe higher than Kisuke, maybe? I think, probably right about here in support. I don't know if I'm going to say this guy's name right. Whis, I think he's pretty good. He is a support unit also. He has a rewind ability. So you want to pair him with Beerus. You want to use him with Beerus because they both have passives, kind of like Naruto and Sasuke, where they're going to buff each other. So you want to use these two together, and Whis is the support. He has a rewind ability, and I'd say he's probably right here. And Beerus is pretty okay for damage, but he's getting a little bit outdated. I'd probably put him in Amazing, and right about here. Oh man, we have a lot of support units back to back. Okay, Law is a support with a rewind ability, kind of like Whis, I'd say. They're kind of interchangeable. Toto is the same thing, a rewind ability, so I'd say kind of interchangeable. Brook is another support, but not a rewind. So he is a Frostbite unit, full AoE, and he's pretty cheap, he's pretty okay, but I'd say there are a lot of other options for Frostbite, and I'd probably put him right about here. Corona is another support unit with a special passive. She's going to stun and slow enemies that get in her range. And on paper it sounds really good, but if you think about it, they're kind of going to cancel each other out a little bit, and other stats effects are just usually better, so she's kind of getting outdated in terms of support. Fear is another support. My goodness, we have a lot back to back, but he is pretty good. He is a full AoE dark unit with the Fear passive, but like a better version of it, a special passive. And it is very, very good for supporting, especially with the right like team, but overall, there are better options. Goku Black, this guy's kind of interesting. He might get reworked soon, but he is still a pretty good progressive unit, I'd say. Very good for like cheap stages where you need to clear out early waves. Probably right behind Sasuke, I'd say. He has the Perfect Seal passive, which is going to give him elemental advantage over every element in the game. And he does have the Black Flame SAS effect, which is going to also do a lot of damage, I guess. And Nagato is actually a pretty good early game unit. So he is a full AoE ground unit on placement with the slow passive. Probably put him like right here. And then he does get pretty good at final upgrade with a circle AoE hybrid damage, pretty good. Still has a slow passive and a special passive that is going to resummon enemies with a bunch of HP. So very, very good. Next we have Poochie, and this guy actually got buffed not too long ago. He has some pretty okay damage. He has full AoE and hybrid, and then he has two status effects, I think. He has pressure and stun, and then he has a special ability which is going to be his most supporting value, where he's going to reset the universe, which is resetting the cooldowns of all his other teammates' abilities. So pretty good support. I'd say probably up here behind Naruto for now. Rimuru actually also got buffed not too long ago. His damage is really good, and he is a Fear full AoE hybrid unit on final upgrade. He also has a special ability, which is going to be probably his most important thing, is going to be a nuke that auto-executes units or enemies that are below 15% HP. So I think it does like 15 bill damage, and auto-executes anything below 15% health. Very, very good for infinite leaderboard runs. I'd probably put him above Yamamoto for meta overall / infinite. Quincy King is kind of getting outdated. He is a full AoE electrified unit, but he's mostly a support with a 10% passive damage buff to units in his range. And he does have a 15 billion damage nuke, so not that bad for progressive. I'd probably put him like below this guy, because they both buff for 10%, but Quincy King is kind of getting outdated in the damage department. Apprentice Kai is, in my opinion, like a better nature version of Aizen. He has a very similar special passive where he's going to gain damage when he gets kills, so he's going to be kind of like an infinite unit. I'd say he's probably at the bottom of meta overall. He does have a 10% damage buff to units in his range. He's very expensive, but he does also have a nuke that I think does 50 bill, maybe? But he is very, very good for full AoE damage if you rack up his passive. Rengoku is a very good option for meta early fire. He has some pretty high damage with a 5 times burn ability, which is going to do a lot of dot damage if you have a Jin Mori lead, I believe. So Rengoku can be really strong with the right team. He is very good for fire content, and he is a cheap early game option for hybrid damage. Jiren is actually pretty similar to Rengoku. He is a fire early game unit, very good damage, 800 place. He's full AoE on placement, and then he does have a special passive, where he's going to do a lot more damage if he doesn't have any other units in his range. So if you keep him by himself, he does a lot of damage, and it's pretty crazy for fire element. Broly is getting a little bit outdated, but he does have a similar passive to Aizen and Apprentice Kai, where he's going to gain damage if he gets kills, and he does actually a lot if you max it out. But yeah, he's a cripple unit with a lot of damage, and he is good for nature infinites, I guess. So I'd probably put him in a meta overall. He's still pretty good with the right trait. Sukuna is one of my least favorite godlies personally, but he is definitely not bad. He did recently get buffed to actually be hybrid on placement, so for 5k he is full AoE and hybrid and has the dismantle passive. He's very good as a dark option for like overall. He can be good in progressives and infinites now because of that hybrid change. So mostly infinite unit because he has very expensive upgrades that give him a bunch of abilities, but overall, meta, probably top 5 at least. He's very good for a godly. All the godlies are really. Needle Queen can be really good for elemental content. So for example, like the legend stages that kind of change elements every so often, because she has the perfect seal passive, which is going to give her elemental advantage over everything in the game, as long as they have an element. So I'd say she's probably an amazing. Her damage isn't the highest in the game, but it is very good after she recently got buffed. I'd probably put her right here above Makima. Pride the One is actually one of my favorite godlies. He's 3.75k to place and hybrid on placement, so he can be pretty good for progressives, and overall just does some really good damage, especially on final upgrade. He does some crazy full AoE damage. I think he's like near the top of the DPS charts right now. Okay, Ichigo, meta early unit. He's very good and very cheap. He also has a passive where he's going to buff nearby units, so that can be really good. But overall, just a very good progressive unit for his early wave damage. Man, we have like every godly right next to each other. I did not mean to do that, but okay, moving on to Goku. This guy is actually very good. He costs 1.5k to place and has some pretty solid hybrid damage on placement. He has some very good damage at final upgrade, and he's mostly a support though. I'd say that he's probably the best support in the game, honestly. So he has a special passive that is going to create a bubble around him, which makes enemies in it take more damage and walk slower. And he has 2 abilities actually, and he has an ability that is going to be Honed Body, which is going to make enemies that spawn in take more damage. And he has another ability which is going to be a nuke for I think 100 bill, which is very strong. Ancient Vampire, or Dio, is actually really strong after they buffed him not too long ago. He has some really high damage, and paired with his insane range, can be some really high AoE DPS. He also has a special ability which is going to time stop every enemy on the map for 60 seconds. Because of that time stop, I'd say he's probably more support oriented, and I'd put him right behind Goku honestly. Very good for infinites for sure. Gojo, another support, very good for infinites again. He got buffed, so I think his nuke ability does more damage, and he also just does more damage overall. But he is similar to Goku with a bubble around him where every enemy in there is going to walk much slower. And then he has a time stop and a nuke and a bunch of damage, so very good support for infinite runs for sure. Archer is an okay unit. He is actually really good for like single target damage. He just doesn't really have much going for him like with special passives or abilities or anything. Overall though, he is a cheap option. He gets hybrid or full AoE at like upgrade 3, so very good for early stages honestly. I'd probably put him like right about here. Saber is actually really good. I'd put her in amazing as well, but towards the top of it, she does some really good damage. She has an ability which is going to buff her crit, I think, and also do a bunch of nuke damage. So very good. She has a couple of good strong passives as well, and overall just a very high damage output. Gilgamesh is a meta early unit, but also can kind of double as like a meta infinite unit, kind of like Giorno here, where he's going to be good in like all categories. So I'd put him in meta early, but under Giorno. He is 800 place, he is hybrid with pretty good damage, and then he does have the cripple passive. And at later upgrades, which are very expensive, he does gain a 75 billion damage nuke, which is also going to auto-execute enemies that are below 25% health. Very good overall. Gilgamesh is very strong for light early game. Finally, Rukia. I'm not sure why we ended up on Rukia, but she is a support unit. I'd probably put her like right about here. She's a full AoE frostbite unit. Not much to say about that really, and there we have it. That is the tier list. I think we're done. Finally, that actually took a lot of yapping. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry if I sound tired in this video. This is a lot of yapping to be doing after the godly grind yesterday, because believe it or not, I do get tired after staying up for the godly grind. But this is the tier list. It does look pretty good in my opinion. Again, it is entirely my opinion, so feel free to let me know what you think in the comments down below. But before you go comment, please do make sure you go back and watch the part I talk about the unit you're commenting about. So like if you're going to leave a comment about Goku, please go watch the part where I rank Goku, because a lot of these units and their tiers can be in multiple. Like, Goku, I'd say, is probably meta overall as well, but he fits more into support in my opinion, and I'm going to keep him in there. So yeah, make sure you watch the video please if you're going to comment, but otherwise feel free to let me know your opinions and I would love to hear them. I do want to say thank you guys a lot, like so much for the support on the last video, because the godly grind took me a very long time, and I'm just really glad that you guys did find some value in it. Like if you thought it was a good video, just fun to watch, or just thought it was helpful because you didn't see the godly yet. I really do appreciate the support because it took me a very long time to grind for, and hopefully you guys do appreciate the effort put into that. So, but anyways, yeah, that's it for the tier list video. Sorry for yapping so much, but I'm gonna go get some sleep now. And thank you to my channel members for making these videos possible. Anyways, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you in the next one, and have a great day.